short awareness video. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of all witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking or ask a question directly by a member. Thanks for adding that. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order to the best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regards. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 20th, 2025, the committee is commencing in its study of the importation of broiler meat mislabeled as spent fowl. I'd like to welcome our witnesses today. Thank you for joining us. From the Chicken Farmers of Canada, Tim Klompmaker, who's the chair, and Yves Roule, Associate Executive Director, and from Natural Resources DNA Profiling and Forensic Center at Trent University, Christopher Kyle, who's the director, and from Sterisense, Jeff Lumby, who's the founder. I'll give each of the delegations 5 minutes to speak. Please try to be on time, and we'll start with the Chicken Farmers of Canada. Welcome, and thank you for joining us here today.
Very much for having us here this morning or this afternoon. So good afternoon. My name is Tim Klompmaker, and I'm a third-generation chicken farmer from Ontario and the chair of Chicken Farmers of Canada. We are here to ask that the committee work with the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food to direct the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Canada Border Services Agency to implement the DNA test that will help stop the fraudulent importation of broiler chicken mislabeled as spent fowl. This border fraud has been impacting Canadian chicken farmers for well over a decade, so thank you for studying this important topic. Chicken Farmers of Canada represents more than 2,800 farmers located in every province. We are built on supply management, ensuring stability for farmers, processors, and consumers. One of the pillars of supply management is import controls, meaning the predictability of imports helps us determine how much chicken must be produced to satisfy the domestic market. While there is market access provided for broiler meat based off agreements with trading partners, there are no restrictions on spent fowl imports, and they can enter Canada duty-free. So spent fowl are egg-laying hens that are processed for their meat at the end of their production cycle. Canada imports both broiler and spent fowl meat. However, one cannot visually distinguish between the two products. As a result, some importers have been purposely mislabeling broiler chicken meat as spent fowl to circumvent Canadian import regulations. Over the years, we have worked closely with AAFC, CFIA, and CBSA to address this fraudulent mislabeling, and they have implemented some measures to try to control the mislabeled imports. From CFIA's suspension of a cold storage establishment in the U.S. to CBSA's inclusion of spent fowl under its priority verification program, over $361 million in duties, interest, and penalties on misdeclared spent fowl has been assessed, proof that the problem is real and that better enforcement is required. I'll take you back. In 2012, we noticed the first warning signs. Imports labeled as spent fowl were exceeding what was even possible in U.S. production. 13 years later, those numbers persist. For 2025, available data from January to August shows that imports of spent fowl have increased by 25% compared to last year. Even more alarming, when converted into a whole bird equivalent, those imports represent 115% of total U.S. spent fowl slaughter. This shows that Canada's import of spent fowl exceed the U.S. entire production. a clear signal that illegal imports are entering the country and concrete action is urgently required. These growing numbers and overall concern for fraudulent imports led to a statement from the Ministers of Agriculture and Agri-Food and Public Safety in March, directing CFIA and CBSA to develop an action plan to improve detection, enforce compliance, and ensure a level playing field. Back in 2014, we worked with Trent University to develop a scientifically validated forensic DNA test that can distinguish between broiler meat and spent fowl in order to help government agencies find a solution to identify mislabeled imports and show our commitment to eradicating this problem. Despite these efforts, there has been no further action from the department nor agencies on the DNA test since 2018, and it has not yet been implemented as part of Canada's import verification process. CFC has committed to investing in more work with Trent on the update of the test in hopes that agencies will implement it as part of their tools to enforce Canadian import regulations and ensure food safety for Canadians. Although it's not guns or drugs, this is illegal activity at our borders. This fraud costs jobs, tax revenue, and fair market competition. More importantly, it risks undermining consumer trust and food safety because mislabeled products can't be traced if there's a recall on the original product. Our farmers take these consequences seriously, so seriously that seeking government implementation of the DNA test by the end of 2026 is a critical priority for our sector. Doing so would not only end this criminal activity, but would generate additional economic activity, strengthen food safety, and restore fairness for Canadian farmers and processors. Together, we can stop this border fraud once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And now to Trent University representatives.
Hello, my name is Christopher Kyle. I'm a professor here at Trent University, and I'm also the director of the Natural Resources DNA Profiling Forensic Center. So today I would like to talk to you about some of the center's services to give you some context on a test that we developed that distinguishes between spent hens and broiler meat. So our facility provides molecular diagnostic support for a range of wildlife research and environmental pathogen detection that included wastewater detection that we report to public health agencies. Our facility also includes a forensic wildlife DNA lab where we provide expert witnesses and services for a range of federal and provincial agencies that have included RCMP, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and Environment and Climate Change Canada. Cases range from poaching, animal abuse, animal attacks, parentage testing of breeding stock, and important for today, food mislabeling. And as I mentioned, food mislabeling, I think it's important to introduce my colleague, Jeff Lumby, who founded SteriSense. SteriSense and Trent worked together on industrial commercialization, testing of international seafood and retail company samples for species identification and population verification. And this relationship expanded greatly in 2011 when Maple Leaf Foods approached SteriSense and Trent University to develop a spent fowl test that distinguished between broiler meat, spent fowl, and to assess the fraudulent mislabeling of spent fowl. So in 2012, contracts were inked between Maple Leaf Foods, Chicken Farmers of Canada, with the planned phases of research and development, followed by proficiency testing and subsequent deployment by the government. By 2014, we had an approximately 800 sample database that was built from sire and dam lines of commercial genetics companies with a 3-stage test to assess shipments across the border. And I think it's important to mention what these 3 phases do. The first phase was to sort sex identification, where the expectation that spent hens from egg layers would have roughly a 98 to 2% ratio of females to males, whereas broilers would have a ratio that was roughly 50-50. The second stage involved using genetic differences between broiler lines and egg laying lines to distinguish between the groups. And then thirdly, in some cases, the parental stock of broilers can enter the spent fowl market. And so we actually had a third phase to distinguish parental stock from the actual broiler meat itself. So this was completed in 2014, and from 2015 to 2017, we actually did do some testing for different commercial groups, and we did have ongoing discussions with CBSA and CFIA to discuss the implementation of the test and to assess the validity of the test. It wasn't until 2018 that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada sent us 90 samples to assess the test. Of the 90 samples, 3 actually weren't even chickens, but were assessed as being a turkey, a cow, and a duck. Of the remaining 87 samples, 73 were properly distinguished. 13 of the samples were unassigned, as some of the genetic variants that we came across were not in our database and thus couldn't be assigned. And then 1 was declared as a misassigned sample, something I'll put an asterisk around for now. After this test, there were some discussions to discuss the results. And in 2019, CBSA representatives did come to visit the Trent lab. But since then, it wasn't until the last 2 weeks where we've had some communication with some of these agencies to discuss the test again. Avec ça, j'aimerais te remercier pour votre temps et intérêt dans notre...
On that note, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and we will now go to Jeff Lumby.
Hi, folks. Thanks. Glad to be here. I haven't got much more to add to what Chris has said.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was the shortest presentation ever. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you. Well, first, so what we'll do now is we'll do a round. We'll start with, for 6 minutes each. We'll go to the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to each of the witnesses who've come here today. I'll start with you, Mr. Compmaker. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Okay, great. Obviously, you've given us a lot of pertinent information here. Can you summarize quickly what the overall impact is on the industry, the poultry industry here in Canada, its impact here, and even a bit into the impact it may be having on our U.S. counterparts as well? So just a brief summary of that, and I have some follow-up questions for you.
Okay, maybe I'll start off, and thank you for the question. I'll start it off with kind of the impact that we're seeing that the U.S. is actually talking about. And then I'll go over to Yves, and he can give you the detail on exactly the impact on our sector in Canada. And actually, in discussions that we had with some of our processors down in the U.S. that do spent fowl, they're actually quite concerned about this because they see themselves as being sole exporters of spent fowl into Canada, and that they're saying that, you know what, we're being unfairly having to compete with these companies that are bringing in broiler chicken that's classified as spent fowl. So they're concerned about it as well, and they're willing to work with us. If we go back to when CBSA or CFIA shut down that storage facility in the U.S., they were very supportive of that occurring as well. So very much on side with us.
Thank you. Mr. Rule, you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you. I'll add on the Canadian impacts. So we assume that legitimate imports should be around 60 million kgs per year. Based on the trend so far this year, we're aiming towards 105 million. So if you take 45 million of illegal imports or very questionable production, the impact of this 45 million is displaced from Canadian production. So in order to, the impact generated by 45 million, you're talking about 3,600 jobs, 394 million in economic contribution to the GDP, and 129 million in taxes. So basically, this is what's taken away from Canadian economic activity by those illegal imports.
Pretty significant impact there for sure. Are there any health risks associated with the mislabeling of broiled chicken as spent fowl? Can you just provide a little background on that as well? Is there some health concerns?
Yeah, obviously, if the chicken is imported illegally, declared as spent fowl, Canadian authorities, they will be able to trace it as spent fowl imports, but not as chicken imports. So if the chicken was to be recalled in the U.S., for whatever reason, there's something at the U.S. processing plant, if they were to recall that chicken, there would be no way to find out that it's made its way in Canada, and it would enter the food chain in Canada, and there would be a food safety risk.
Well, thank you. And just further to that, are you aware of any other countries dealing with similar issues like this? And what are they doing about this? Like, do you know of other jurisdictions that are facing something similar around the world?
No, I'm not aware of any other countries. Most of the time, if they have import controls on chicken, it would be on the overall chicken species. It would not be broken down, because in our case, we have import control on chicken, broiler chicken, but not on spent fowl.
Thank you. And quickly to Mr. Kyle, I just wonder, my understanding is that you have the test, it's been developed, and it was first put out kind of, you did the test and reviewed in 2018. They identified a couple of questions or issues or challenges. But can you tell us as to what developments you've made or adjustments to alleviate the concerns? And have they addressed with you why they haven't implemented this test yet?
It's a challenging question to answer, but there was no more funding. We did the proficiency test. Things did not continue beyond the meetings we had in 2018 and the tour that we had in 2019. And as such, there's been no further developments in refining the database. And so that's what was just mentioned by Chicken Farmers of Canada, is that we're about to re-embark on updating the database, which will be critical. And I think an ongoing update of the database each year will be critical to making sure we maintain its validity. And I think a lot has happened in over a decade in our ability to do this type of work, where I think we could probably make it much better. And that's our goal in the coming years, to build on that preliminary proficiency test that quite honestly had a few minor issues with it. But I think the important part is, whenever you're doing a forensic case, is to always have a none of the above choice. And so those 13 of 87 samples that we didn't assign, I think that's an important thing to maintain, and to remember that we're going to be assessing shipments, not individual samples. And so overall, I think that 3-phase test could be implemented quite soon, but we'd really like to update that database.
You feel quite confident in where the science is on this, that any concerns that were brought up have been alleviated, that this could withstand a court challenge, you feel?
So I guess that's why I tried to introduce some of the services that we do provide. We do provide expert witness testimony when need be for a range of forensic cases. And so you're going to like this comment, perhaps. We like to be conservative on those fronts in making those assignments. And so we will be developing relative probabilities. It doesn't mean that we're absolutely right, but we will be giving you something to the equivalent of what you might hear in a human DNA forensic
Okay, thank
case,
you.
such
Thank
as
you
there's
very
a 1
much.
in X chance.
Thank you very much. Mr. Perron?
Oui, je suis désolé, Monsieur le Président, mais là, j'appelle au règlement.
I'm sorry, but point of order, there is a strange sound which is disrupting the meeting. Those who are speaking in French are being interpreted, which we are listening to in our earpieces, and we would like to know if this is actually harmful to them, because we know that their health and safety is at risk. And a second question is, can we send somebody to stop that?
I've asked Chris, who works with me, to go downstairs. I think there's some construction, so no interpretation? Okay, I'll start again. Thank you so much, Mr. Perron, for bringing it to her. It's okay.
J'aimerais que les interprètes nous disent que
I'd like the interpreters to tell us if this is disturbing their work.
Right.
donc on me dit que ça perturbe, fait que moi je pense qu'il faut qu'on fasse pause au comité puis qu'on envoie en bas pour que ça arrête puis qu'on continuera après.
So I think that we actually need to suspend the committee and send somebody to stop that sound.
So what we'll do is we will suspend, but I just wanted to let people know we've sent someone down already. So, okay, we'll suspend for a few minutes. Suspend. We're good? Okay. The interpreters are good. I've got a thumbs up. So we will now go to MP Harrison for 6 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair? Chair. It's always a great day when there are some people from the riding of Peterborough here, and especially those who are advocating so strongly for farmers. So I really appreciate you being here. It's nice to see you today. The Chicken Farmers of Canada have invested a lot of time and money into this issue. Could you please tell the committee how much Chicken Farmers of Canada have invested into the initial DNA test to date, and how much do you estimate the cost will be to update and maintain the database used to identify spent fowl?
Yeah, it's great to be here, and yeah, certainly being from Peterborough too is great. So, with that, when we first did the DNA test with Trent University, it was $250,000 that we spent. We just made a commitment as a board of directors about 2 weeks ago to invest another $350,000 to recertify that test. So there's been a significant amount of money that's put forward, and I know maybe it appears that the board of directors is being somewhat presumptuous as where we may end up. The board of directors is such that, you know what, this is getting out of hand and needs to be addressed. So they certainly were very committed to spending the money.
Thank you for that. Have you observed any regional disparities in the impact of these imports across Canada?
Yeah. We don't know exactly where those imports end up. Most of the imports, you have to assume, that comes in central Canada, Quebec and Ontario. But the impact will be felt all across the country because it's illegal production that reduces our opportunity to grow more chicken. And that chicken will be grown in all 10 provinces. So it's really a widespread impact all across the country.
Thank you. To Mr. Kyle, welcome, another Peterborough, a Peterborough professor from Trent University. I just love Trent, so thank you so much for being here. Could you talk a little bit about how reliable the test is in distinguishing between broiler meat and spent fowl?
So for the ones that we assigned, and so I can only really speak to the tests that we did nearly a decade ago. How reliable the test would be now, we need to reassess what genetic lines there are and how distinct they are. So speaking back to the test, it was quite reliable, but it was not, it didn't have a fine polish on it. And that's the fine polish that we look to put on it right now to assess its current reliability. I think the fact that we assigned 85% of the samples correctly is strong evidence that it worked well, and that 13 we didn't assign. And I think, as I was mentioning just before the interruption, that's a critical part of any forensic test, and in providing forensic evidence in a legal context, is that you have to have the wherewithal to know when not to make a call, and I think that spoke well of our test.
Thank you. And just a follow-up to that, how long does it typically take to receive the results from the test?
Again, I guess from receiving the sample to actually giving a result, I would hope that it depends on relative priorities. This would not be the only thing that our center is doing, but if there was a commitment, I would be able to have staff to prioritize this, and one would expect that we would provide answers within a few weeks if it was streamlined. Our current turnaround time for more generic cases that we do with Ministry of Natural Resources in Ontario or across the country for that matter is that we promise to have an answer within 3 months, but different investigations are all quite different. If there was a streamlined, more industrial process, and I think I can speak to that from the wastewater work we did with public health, we were giving next day answers during the pandemic, and so we have that capacity should that arise.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Klonmaker or to Yves. How do you envision the DNA test being integrated into the existing inspection enforcement framework?
Answered that. Okay, thanks. Well, first, it's really not to us to really dictate to government agencies how they should do it, because they are the one responsible for tariff classification, and they are the one that have access to the imported shipments. One thing for sure, that we've never asked that the test be administered at the border, because we understand how it could be disruptive with the irregular flow of merchandise between countries. So currently, CFIE inspect meat shipments at receiving plants. So when meat is imported in Canada, there's some random inspection for food safety within the plants that receive the meat. We think that would be the proper place to take samples for DNA, but clearly we never asked that it's be done at the border. And definitely, I think combining it with the food safety inspection that already take place would probably be the most efficient way. But at the same time, it's up to CBSA and CFIA to decide what's the proper risk level and what's the best way to do it, because they don't ask me for the way to conduct their own operation.
Thank you. To either of you, how does this issue affect domestic pricing and market competitiveness for Canadian chicken producers?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's like this year we expect it's 45 million kgs of chicken that you don't produce. So first, there's an opportunity in terms of lack of economic activity, lack of production. The illegal products also, it's unfair competition for the processors. All the Canadian chicken processors that follow the rules, suddenly they see that there's a competitor that can outprice them with supply that comes from apparently spent fowl, but in reality it's not spent fowl, it's chicken. So it's unfair competition for all the legitimate players throughout the chain.
Mr. Perron, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. We appreciate you being here, and apologies for the technical issue earlier. I am a little bit sick of seeing this DNA test issue being brought up. I've been the critic for agriculture since 2019. I've been told, you're saying that the test started in 2014. You say that in 2018 and 2019, that testing was stopped. You've had a lot of questions, how your market was impacted, and we understand that there were some pretty big impacts, but we want people at home or, elsewhere to understand what's actually happening. These spent fowls are crossing the border. Once they're at the border, the chicken is actually cut, quartered, and then it's just labeled chicken, and then it's sent to shops. Is that it? From a practical point of view, chicken is put into a box that is labeled spent fowl, because spent fowl is not subject to the same restrictions as chicken when it's imported. So that is exported illegally to Canada, but it is imported as spent fowl in order to counter tariffs and taxes. So that is going against supply management, for example. So you have paid to develop this DNA test. If I understand correctly, industry stakeholders have invested their money to develop this at Trent University, but there's never been any public funds? Answer, yes, that is an issue that is huge for the poultry sector. And both products visually look almost exactly the same, so an inspector can't tell the difference. We've had contact with Maple Leaf for a number of years, as mentioned, and we were put in touch with scientists at Trent University to explore the issue. The issue was so serious that we thought it was worth being proactive and make the investments in order to find a solution and present one that would be that would work for the government. What put an end to the work that you were doing? As Mr. Kyle mentioned, there were various test verification steps with Trent and with us. I can't speak on behalf of the government. What my impression is as follows. The government decided to prioritize internal verification processes, so accounting of documents related to the imports, for example. As mentioned by the minister in March, more than $300 million was claimed for fraudulent imports. So there were extra efforts that were made, and I think that it was a good effort, but 10 years later, what we're seeing is that those extra verification processes, and despite the fact that 3 times we put this item on a risky list, the problem is not disappearing, and so it's time for us to take action. don't you think that we should just complete the verification process with that test? I don't understand why we gave that up. This country claims to care about research, development, and investment. We can have a scientific test in order to have a good process at the border that works. You mentioned that there are already inspections in some places, and it seems like it would be easy to do that. 10, 12 years later, this is resembling the long time frames for product certification at the PMRA. It's too long. Mr. Kyle from Trent University, I have a question for you. Earlier, you mentioned that you have 85% of success, and that's when the work stopped. Now you're saying that you can revalidate and you can step this up in a couple of weeks, and within 3 months you could fix this entire issue. How much, is that what you said? Correct me if I'm wrong, and how long would it take? It's not about the results. If we take a sample, it would take us, well, it depends on the resources. If we don't have the resources, then it will take more time to even get the samples and get results. With regards to prices, sorry to cut you off, but that's what I'm asking. But what resources do you need? We have to make a proper recommendation to the government, and I would like to put some numbers on this. You know, we think that specialists would cost this much. We were recommending that the government do this, and it would be, fixed within 3 to 6 months. Do you think that that kind of recommendation is realistic to make?
I'll tell you what monetary resources we need right now, and maybe Jeff, you'd like to step in here. It's going to take us some time to reestablish the database. That's going to take us, I think the proposal we put forth to Chicken Farmers of Canada is that we're going to work on that over the next year. So we want to, reassess the test, reestablish the databases, and we have been given the resources to do that by Chicken Farmers of Canada. As to the resources to actually deploy the test, I can't speak to that right now, and I don't know if, Jeff, you think you can. Those discussions did happen in the past, but we're a decade later.
Yeah, if I can jump in.
I'm going to stop you there, Jeff. I apologize, but the time is finished, so I'm just going to go to the Conservatives, and maybe you'll be able to bring that up after. So I'm going to go to Mr. Gord for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question is for Mr. Ruel. It seems that we can estimate with a lot of precision the volume of these fake hens that are entering Canada, but we don't necessarily know where they're going. How do we estimate if we don't know how many are entering the country? The calculation that we made to see how many of them are illegal are based on the slaughtering numbers in the United States. And we also know that they don't send 100% of their chickens to Canada. So it is impossible for the import level to be so high. What we calculated this year is what we've imported is 115% of what's slaughtered in the United States, which is impossible because they also export elsewhere. So the issue here is spent fowl. They are getting, cargoes that say spent fowl that are labeled as such, and in those boxes there might be some broiler chicken. We can find the guilty parties pretty easily. It must be all of the people who are importing spent fowl. Well, that's what the labels say. They say spent fowl, and that's where the risk is. But we don't actually have access to that cargo. It's CBSA who has access to it. As poultry farmers, we can't, tell them to open up their cargo and say we want to see what's in there. We don't actually have the power to do that. It's government authorities who have and officials who can do that. The proportion of fake chicken, what is it, 50% of the spent fowl imports? We estimate that a normal volume of imports from the United States would be 60 million kilograms. And right now we're looking at 105 million for this year. So it doesn't seem legitimate to us. This broiler chicken ends up on the Canadian market. And where is it going? To distributors? To processors? Is it in restaurants? We don't know. And no one is going to actually boast the fact that they've bought products illegally, or illegal products, rather. I feel like we can make a list of importers, and then we can find some of the culprits. Is it one or two establishments who are doing this? Or are there any clean importers? I think CBSA are in a better position to answer that question. They are making the third round of verification for the import of spent fowl. And up to now, they've declared $361 million in tariffs or penalties and interests for the import of falsely declared spent fowl. So many importers have done it, and they will have more information on this subject. They have some confidentiality rules that they have to follow, but we don't actually have the details. We are not responsible for enforcing Canadian laws. I imagine that there's a lot of people who are making a lot of money on the backs of our poultry farmers in Canada. It's very disappointing because we want to protect our agriculture infrastructure in Canada. We have to send a clear message to those importers. What can we do to help Canada and our agriculture, but also what should we not do? These people are stealing money from our farmers. We agree, and we thank you for having held this study because it's an important subject to us. As it's been said, we've already invested $250 million into research, and we're ready to invest another $350 million to improve the tests, and we want to contribute to that. Thank you.
We'll go to the Liberals, 5 minutes. MP Chatel.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. We know how hard our farmers work. We are all here together in order to have a strong Canadian economy. There are some struggles commercially with our neighbors to the south, so it's important to detect fraud in the import sector, to figure that out. We have commercial agreements and trade agreements, and we respect them, and so we need to make sure that they're respected both ways. We need to be able to detect cases of fraud as well. I have 3 main questions. First of all, you mentioned DNA tests. Mr. Ruel, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Are there any other methods that can be employed? CBSA does some tracing. They identified $361 million in fraud, in fraudulent money, if I remember correctly. There are some methods to, to verify, and we'd like to hear more. Over the last few years, CBSA have done some verifications with certain importers. I don't have the exact amount, but they figured that there was a certain volume that was fraudulently declared and imported under the wrong tariff class. And CBSA declared $361 million in penalties and interests for those falsely declared imports. They can explain that better than I can because they're the ones who do the verification. But that process happens 1 year or 18 months after the import. So it's a verification of the documents and the accounting documents. So it's a good effort, but despite those efforts, the illegal import is not diminishing, and there's more of them this year. So we have to be responsible and look to other solutions if the solutions in place are not working. Thank you. I understand that there are verification processes that do work because the money's there. You would like to see a different method be applied at the same time. My colleague, Mr. Perron, asked what resources it would take. We are all aware that we have to be very careful in the amount of money that we're investing because it's taxpayers' money. We want to invest it well. If DNA tests are required, do we have the infrastructure ready, or do we have to make that infrastructure? For example, if we need to have some tests, does the spent fowl have to be stocked in, large fridges in order to allow inspectors to go test it on site? Do we have to build? Do we have to invest in the building of new infrastructure in order to have refrigerated areas in order to be able to stock the chicken, for example? I don't really understand how it's going to be implemented nor how much it's going to cost. Same question as my colleague. I don't want to get involved in government operations. That's for the CFIA or CBSA's job. Here's what we're thinking. With regards to the cost, it's probably pretty minimal and probably less than what is being spent on verification right now. Once industry players are made aware of the DNA tests, the illegal exports will probably stop because an efficient test will be in place and they'll know about that. Secondly, we never thought about them. We were thinking of, maybe stocking some of the meat cargo and getting it tested and then it being released after a couple of weeks. Thank you. Mr. Lumby, I have a question for you. Earlier, you said that you don't necessarily have all of the data necessary to make sure that the DNA test is efficient and for it to actually lead to charges of fraud. What is the state of these data sets? Is there a lack of data that prevents us from using that test in a conclusive manner?
That one, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a question really for Chris, but if I can just quickly put a preamble in there. After the test
Jeff,
was created,
I'm sorry. This is the second time I had to do it to you. I have to move on to the next person. We've got very limited time here. I apologize. Hopefully someone can ask you the question again. Mr. Perron, 2.5 minutes.
Monsieur Lumby, je vous donne 10 secondes pour me répondre à ça.
Mr. Lumby, I'll give you 20 seconds to answer that question.
Thanks, Mr. Perron, and thanks for your comments earlier. We tested for industry parties after creating the test and while we were waiting for the government to decide whether or not to deploy it. At that time, when I interacted with those groups, they all were so afraid of the test. It's my understanding that imports dropped off and they thought that the government had already deployed the test, even though they hadn't. The point is the deterrence factor was huge. On your earlier question, Mr. Perron, glad to talk about those costs of the deployment. The costs of creating the test again or updating are one thing, deploying it's another. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ruel, if I understand correctly, the answers that we were told, we should have a test within a year, and that would complete the administrative work that you're doing, which brought us to the $361 million. So if we recommend to the government to make the necessary investments in order to implement that data for infrastructure that already exists, then it wouldn't be all that costly. Does that make sense? Indeed. We actually are ready at the Poultry Farmers of Canada, at the Canadian the chicken farmers of Canada to actually contribute to that and invest in it. Is there anything else that we could do? Let's pretend that there is an ideal world and the government does have the resources to invest, and within a year we do put that DNA test in place. Now, this administrative process actually did provide some proper results. Is there anything else administratively that we could do? Administratively, I'm not sure, because we've tried a lot of different things over the last 10 years, and the illegal imports have continued. So we want results. We're not trying to change the process too much. You know, when we receive more imports of chicken and spent fowl than what is actually produced in the United States, aren't we? They're taking us for fools, aren't they? Well, Canadian importers are actually also taking advantage of that loophole. The Americans that we've met with are actually on our side and want to limit the illegal export of spent fowl.
We're fine. So we'll go to John for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the witnesses. Certainly understand how an important issue this is when we see those numbers that have skyrocketed over the last few years. And I guess to kind of go on my colleague's question, and I think it was Mr. Lumby or Mr. Kyle who had mentioned that, you know, the testing was done, or the development of the tests was done, and then it ran out of resources. I see this as a program that should be self-sustaining when their government, the Liberal government, is collecting $360 million in penalties and tariffs. Could that, maybe to Mr. Lumby, could the government, or has the government had discussions that the tariffs and fines collected from the illegal importation of these spent fowl be used? Would that be sufficient to fund the expansion or the additional development of the test that needs to be done?
We haven't had those discussions in the past, but that's an order of magnitude difference there, right? $350K to develop the test versus $350 million taking in penalties.
Maybe to Mr. Klantmaker, have you had those discussions with the government at all? This seems to be a resource issue. Funding is clearly coming in and would be exponential, I think, once for a short time. Hopefully the deterrent was there. But is that a discussion you've had with the government in terms of using the tariffs and fines that they've collected as a means of funding the DNA testing and the development of that DNA test?
At this point, we have not had those discussions with government exactly how it is that they would operationalize the whole thing as far as the DNA test is concerned. So that certainly is a solution.
So in your conversations with the government, you know, since you said this has become more and more of an issue over the last few years, what is the reasoning the government has given you not to provide the resources necessary to develop this DNA test and get it implemented, when clearly, to the testimony of Mr. Lumby, even the threat of having that DNA test has been a deterrent? What has been the excuse from the government not to provide the resources necessary to get this in place?
Well, I guess what we've heard from government is that they felt that the enforcement that they had in place today was sufficient, and they showed as to what they were actually issuing as far as in fines and interests and duties that they were taking in, that it showed that their enforcement was actually working. Our concern is that we're seeing those numbers at that $360 million. We see that on the enforcement, but we're still seeing spent fowl imports going up. So all the stuff that's happening at this point is by paper verification, right? So our thing is that you can't argue with science. You can forge a piece of paper, but you can't change science. So that's why we're on the page that once the DNA test is in place, that is the true deterrent, because there's no questioning.
So I guess one quick question for me: would you agree with the government's assessment that their fines and current deterrents that they say are enough, sufficient? Would you agree with that assessment?
No, I would not.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair? Thank you. I guess, you know, you talk about the science, and I am concerned, as we had the Agriculture Minister here on Thursday, and time after time he said, yes, we have the science, but we're in a geopolitical situation here, that we're making decisions on politics rather than defending our science and our protocol in Canada, and thus defending our producers. Is this just a means of resources, or does there need to be some political will here by the Minister of Agriculture and Minister of Health to make sure that this happens?
Certainly, there needs to be the political will to get it done, no doubt.
Has the letter that was done in March, that's 6 or 7 months ago, have you seen any progress from the date of that letter until we are now, when we see those numbers up 25%, the most recent stats? Have you seen any progress from the government in terms of resolving this issue?
Maybe I'll turn that question over to Yves. He's probably better qualified to answer that.
Thanks. Well, we had two meetings, one August 1st and one October 14th, to update us on discussions that took place between CFIA and CBSA, but nothing concrete in terms of new actions or action plan as far as we know.
So it's been 7 or 8 months and no action. Well, it's actually been more than 10 years and still no action. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Connors.
Marianne is going to.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much. I am somebody who really defends the supply management system because I believe in it. Thank you very much for your commitment as well to supply management. And it's very interesting to see what projects you have lined up. I'd like to have more context. Here's what I understand. 45 million kilos are imported. What is the Canadian production of chicken in kilograms? Canadian is 1.4 billion kilos of chicken produced. And what is the U.S. import quota? They are underneath the World Trade Organization's quotas. So 55 to 57 million kilos this year. I'd just like to say that the 45 million kilos is mostly chicken breast. If we're talking about chicken, production, then we're talking about doubling the number because we're talking about 45 million kilos of chicken breast, not entire chickens. So we have an idea now of what we're looking at. So they're sending over about 1.5 times what they're allowed to send over because they're cheating. We have to be clear. I think it takes two to tango. Importers, exporters. It is actually maybe more motivated by the importers who can have access to illegally imported chicken rather than the United States that are taking advantage of the situation. We will speak more about solutions that we can implement with the CBSA later, but I'd like to see how this would all work. You are saying that the CBSA should make those decisions. Earlier, we said that it would take weeks to get any results at all. So the cargoes would, be consumed by the time we actually implement that process. I'd like to hear what your vision is, along with the scientists, of how this would work once the DNA test would be implemented. Here's what we had discussed about 10 years ago as a suggestion for the government. The government has to determine the risk level, first and foremost. Do they inspect one cargo over 10? It's up to them to determine that. When the container or the truck is opened up for food safety inspection, then a sample of the chicken should be taken and sent to the Trent laboratory, and they would share the results with the CBSA. If the results say that it was falsely declared, then the CBSA will follow up with the illegal importer. We never talked about, retaining the product. The verifications currently are about happen 12 to 24 months after the product is imported. The products are not, held back for 12 to 24 months. We don't want to complicate things. We don't want the process to be longer than it already is. But what's important is for everybody in this industry to know that a test exists. And if they know that, then they won't take any risks. For the scientists, what is the value? How much do we estimate those tests might cost? You know, maybe the university doesn't have the resources, and maybe it would take a few weeks to get a result, even if it were prioritized. You've paid for the development of that test, but how about the cost of the test and the cost of maintaining an up-to-date database? How much would it cost, and who would pay for it?
So I wish I was more confident in French and I could address that answer in French. My apologies. I don't think we're really prepared to tell you how much each test is going to cost right now. Things have changed tremendously in the last 10 years. I can tell you that simple reagents are 2 and 3 times what they were at that point, and so we'll have to reassess that. Please remember that, you know, we hadn't heard about any real attempts to rejuvenate this test until just a few weeks ago. So we look forward to providing those estimates and telling you how fast we could provide results. But right now, we're just focused on working with Chicken Farmers of Canada, getting the database back up and running, reassessing the test. And I would assume there would be some cost, obviously, to maintaining the database as the producers change their genetics with time, and we need to be able to adapt with time and provide the most reliable results that are contemporary.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all of the witnesses for joining us here today. This is an important study. We appreciate your time. We'll suspend for 5 minutes. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of our new witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the motion adopted by the committee on October 20th, 2025, the committee is reassuming its study on importation of broiler meat mislabeled as spent fowl. I'd like to welcome our witnesses joining us here today. Online, Diane Allen from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, thank you for joining us. And from CBSA, Kathy Toxopeus and Alexander Lawton, thank you for joining us. We'll give you 5 minutes each, and why don't we start with Diane Allen for 5 minutes first.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear here on behalf of the CBSA, or rather the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Our vocation is scientific, and we have two mandates: protect and promote. Our main responsibility is to protect the food supply chain, the health of animals and of people across Canada. We also play an essential role by facilitating trade in order to support the resilience of the agriculture and agri-food industries and sectors.
The agency applies an economic lens to its work without compromising health and safety by ensuring that all food, whether produced domestically or imported, meets consistent, science-based standards. This enables trade, protects market integrity, and supports the success of Canadian farmers and food producers. As for the issue related to spent fowl, it is important to note that broiler chicken imports are tightly controlled and subject to tariffs, while spent fowl can be imported freely. The matter of broiler chickens being incorrectly declared as spent fowl when imported is not a food safety or labeling concern. In Canada, all chicken products, whether produced locally or imported, are sold and labeled as chicken. The distinction between broiler chicken and spent fowl matters only for import tariffs, which is neither food safety nor labeling issue, which I mentioned earlier. What is at stake here is that some imported chicken may be incorrectly declared as spent fowl to avoid higher tariffs. The Canadian Border Services Agency is the lead authority for enforcing tariff and import declaration requirements, while the CFI's role is mandated to provide regulatory oversight and scientific expertise to ensure that food is safe, animals are healthy, and to support trade and economic prosperity of Canada's agricultural resource base. While we are not the lead agency on tariff enforcement, the CFI does continue to work closely with domestic and international partners, particularly the United States Departmental Agriculture, Food Safety, and Inspection Service, to ensure that all imported meat products, whether they be spent fowl or broiler chicken, come from approved systems that meet or exceed Canada's food safety requirements. An official meat certificate endorsed by a USDA veterinarian is required for import of meats and meat products from the U.S. Again, both spent fowl and broiler chicken are declared. The health certificate includes attestation related to the food safety, animal health, and traceability information, including details on where the animals are slaughtered, processed, and stored before they're exported to Canada. By maintaining a strong scientific-based standards, the CFI protects consumers, animals, and plant health, and preserves the confidence of trading partners, all of which contribute directly to a more resilient and competitive Canadian agri-food economy. In closing, the matter of imported chicken and tariffs is not a food safety nor a labeling issue. Therefore, CFI has really no role in this area. Chair, the CFI is responsible for overseeing the safety of Canada's food supply and protecting animals' health and plant resource base. The CFI's regulatory framework is both there to safeguard and to create a foundation for economic strength. Protecting food safety, animals, and plants not only support public health, but it sustains market confidence and fuels continued growth across Canada, agriculture, and agri-food sector. Thank you for your attention. I'd be pleased to answer any questions from the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now go to the Canadian Border Service Agency for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Alex Lawton, and I'm the Executive Director responsible for the Canada Border Services Agency's Trade Compliance Program. As the committee may be aware, the CBSA has a dual mandate to safeguard our borders and facilitate legitimate travelers and goods into Canada. In carrying out its mandate, the agency administers more than 100 acts, regulations, and agreements on behalf of other federal government departments, provinces, and territories. Within the CBSA, my area works to ensure that all importers and exporters understand and respect Canadian trade laws and international trade agreements relating to the movement of commercial goods across Canada's borders. We assess duties and taxes owing on imported goods, conduct compliance verification audits, ensure the integrity of Canadian trade data, and by doing so, support the competitiveness of Canadian businesses. Under Canada's tariff rate quota system, agricultural goods imported within the quota are subject to lower rates of duty, and goods imported over the quota are classified under higher rates of duty. Allegations have previously been brought to our attention that some importers were incorrectly classifying broiler chicken imported to Canada, which is subject to a tariff rate quota and a rate of duty of 249%, as spent fowl in order to avoid the tariff rate quota requirement and a higher rate of duty. Spent fowl is meat processed from egg-laying hens once they have passed their useful productivity. Spent fowl is not subject to the tariff rate quota, whereas broiler chicken is. The CBSA maintains a robust post-release verification regime and has made spent fowl the subject of regular trade compliance verifications. In response to stakeholder concerns, the CBSA developed tailored verification procedures to verify this specific commodity. These procedures serve to create a comprehensive audit approach and provide a more effective means of identifying non-compliance by engaging all parties involved in the supply chain, including exporters, importers, and Canadian customers, in order to validate the accuracy of the import declarations. Between January 2010 and October 2025, the CBSA concluded 176 verifications of spent fowl and assessed $377,416,130 in duty, interest, and penalties as a result. Another 18 verifications or other compliance actions are still in process. These verification results show a significant decline in non-compliance since 2017. Initial rounds of spent fowl verifications in 2017 and 2020 as a national priority resulted in an overall non-compliance rate of 38%. The most recent round of verifications, launched in September 2023, has so far resulted in a 15% non-compliance rate. The CBSA continues to seek improvements in how it identifies and addresses non-compliance. With the release of the CBSA Assessment and Revenue Management System, or CARM, on October 21, 2024, the CBSA now has higher quality and more timely data, plus an improved ability to analyze this data and identify potential non-compliance. By facilitating aggregation analysis of trade data, CARM allows the CBSA to better identify changes in an individual importer's import patterns over time, inconsistencies in an importer's trading activities relative to others importing the same commodity, or even discrepancies in how an importer describes its goods at different stages of the import process. As a result, CARM has improved the CBSA's ability to detect potential non-compliance while also decreasing the time it takes to do so, and this is expected to directly impact the agency's ability to detect and address imports of poultry incorrectly classified as spent fowl. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the CBSA's work concerning this issue. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll go to the Conservatives now for 6 minutes. I'll start with, Mr. Bragdon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to each of the witnesses today. And I want to start with you, Ms. Allen, if I may. A question. You received a letter from the Minister of Health and the Minister of Agriculture, correct, back in March, and they were insisting on this matter being resolved. On what date will the matter get resolved, in your estimate?
Mr. Chair, we have had a significant amount of progress between discussions between ourselves at the CFIA and CBSA in sharing intelligence and information. We have met with a variety of stakeholders across the value chain, whether it be the Canadian Chicken Farmers of Canada. We also met with our colleagues of Food and Beverage Canada, as well as a number of other stakeholders, and we continue to provide stakeholder engagement in that space. We also are gathering further information, and we have discussions recently with Trent and CFC. So as we can continue to engage with our colleagues and
thanks, Ms. Allen. I got short time, and I've got to try and get a few more questions in here. So if indeed we've seen a 25% increase in the mislabeled product coming into this country since the beginning of this year alone, how is this being mitigated? Has there been any steps? It doesn't seem like it. Seems like there's been more conversations, there's been more talks, and a lot more discussion. But what concrete action has been taken by CFIA to address this problem that's been raised by both the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Health?
Mr. Chair, as you heard from your colleagues earlier, Trent University, there are some discussions happening there, and we are discussing the rigor of the methodology that they're using. In 2018, when we were engaged with them, there were limitations that were found of the test, and we do know that the threshold for risk, as was mentioned by the Chicken Farmers of Canada, is something that we need to look at without necessarily underplaying the upstream and downstream impacts in terms of the value chain in Canada.
Ms. Allen, is it not true that this does pose a serious food safety risk to Canadians because of obviously the ag allergy aspect and the traceability aspect, and that this is a huge concern not only for the producers here in Canada, it's actually a concern on both sides of the border. This is something that needs urgent attention and needs to be addressed. It seems like what we're hearing is that there's just going to be more discussions and further discussions and more examination. What concrete steps is CFI taking to get this matter resolved expeditiously?
Mr. Chair, as I indicated earlier, we have had some intelligence exchange between ourselves. There has been a decrease in non-compliances, as was mentioned by my colleague, the Border Services. And just to go back to your point about the food safety issue, although there are studies that spent fowl may contain egg protein, the risk is managed by industry through good manufacturing practices, and allergen labeling is available and exists to inform consumers when allergen such as egg is present on processed food products.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. To CBSA, to Mr. Watton, and according to the March ministerial statement, $361 million in duties and interest and penalties were assessed during the verification rounds. However, we do not know how much was actually paid to CRA. Could you please update the committee on the issue? Do you have any insight on that?
Unfortunately, I don't have the number in front of me in terms of how much was paid. That's something I could circle back and provide at a later date. Unfortunately, I don't have that number here.
Yeah, please table that with us. Thank you. Mr. Chair, do I have?
Yep. You have 2 minutes left?
Oh, I have 2 minutes? Okay,
Yep.
great. I'm going to actually, to my good colleague here to my right, Mr. Epp, I think has a question at this time as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to explore just a bit more that this is not a food safety issue with the witness online. How is mislabeled product that prevents food traceability not a food safety issue? If she could elaborate, please.
Thank you for the question. As I indicated in my opening remarks, we work with our USDA colleagues, and we have full traceability of all chicken product, whether it be spent fowl or broiler chicken, through the system. So we have access to all the traceability information. So it is therefore not a food safety issue.
How, if I can follow up, how can you trace something that's mislabeled?
All product that is processed, slaughtered in the U.S., it has to be indicated into the documentation from the meat import documentation with a U.S. veterinarian attesting to that information. So it is fully traced out on both sides of the border.
Why did your agency shut down a storage warehouse in Detroit?
I was not at the CFI, unfortunately, so I'd have to go back and look into the details of how that shutdown happened. I can certainly table that with the members of the committee.
For the record, that warehouse was involved with the mislabeled importation or export, I guess in that case, of product, spent fowl labeled as broiler meat coming into Canada. CFIA, Madam, your agency shut it down. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We'll go to MP Danduran for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge of the situation with us. I'd like to better understand the relationship between the CBSA and the CFIA. How does the information exchange work? What's the process that both organizations go through.
Question. I think that what happens first is, regardless of if the poultry is spent fowl or chicken, broiler chicken, there are important documentation submitted to the CBSA, which goes through the single window information system. That single window information system submits that and triggers a review for CFIA, who has access to that system, and they make the release decision. When it comes to the border, our officers are not permitted to release any sort of poultry without that CFIA decision on record. So that is how that goes. And then furthermore, to some of Ms. Allen's further mention, we do have an exchange of information for any sort of things that they want to flag, for any sort of trade verification fraud related kind of things.
Okay. Et dans le scénario où on aurait un
In the event that there would be a potential DNA test that the CBSA would send to a university in Ontario for analysis, and we would get results. Well, how long do you think that that would take from one end to the other, from start to finish, in your experience?
Depend on the way in which it was done, whether it is done at the port of entry, whether the truck is held at the port of entry to do that DNA testing, whether that truck is referred to a warehouse inland to do that DNA testing. We wouldn't be able to opine on how much it would cost or what the implications would be before knowing exactly how that would function.
Est-ce que c'est une solution, selon vous, qui est viable?
Is this a viable solution, in your opinion? Would it improve the situation if we had a DNA test in place? Could we stop the import of mislabeled spent fowl?
If that's going to stop it. The only thing I think we can comment on is if the DNA testing would have any sort of implications towards our trade verification processes, which I'll turn over to my colleague.
Thank you. Yes, from a tariff classification duty rate perspective, the defining characteristic of spent fowl, what makes spent fowl is essentially the age of a chicken. The fact that it has to be older chicken that no longer produces eggs. So to the extent that a DNA test was able to establish how old the chicken is, we could use it, it could be useful. However, if the DNA test was only to be, would only be able to indicate, for example, what breed of chicken was used for that meat, it could not be used to determine tariff classification or to determine whether the goods were mislabeled or misclassified or not. It would just be one indicator among many that we would use to inform our paper-based audits and verifications.
Okay. Et pouvez-vous réexpliquer comment...
Can you explain once again how the CBSA and CFIA are currently detecting these cases of mislabeled spent fowl that are entering Canada?
Sure. Essentially, it's a trade compliance process, an audit process, where we have a number of different ways of risking individual shipments, especially within spent fowl. We'll look at import patterns. So if there's a new importer who suddenly begins importing spent fowl, that becomes one factor we look at. Within the spent fowl space, if there's certain importers who are bringing in what they call spent fowl, but it's at a different price than everyone else, that's another factor. By looking at all these different factors, even, for example, an importer declaring their goods at the border as broiler chicken, and then when it comes time to account and pay the duties, they call it spent fowl. That's another risk. It's a pretty obvious risk factor, but that's a risk factor. Using that, we're able to identify who should be verified, who should be audited by the CBSA to confirm whether their goods are spent fowl or not. During the verification process, we don't just look at the importer and the importer's books and records. We'll also contact the foreign exporter as well as the importer's customers. So at that point, we have a full line of sight on the supply chain. If the exporter in the foreign country is calling it spent fowl and everything lines up in that respect, if the importer has all the documentation saying it's spent fowl, and if their customers in Canada say they're using spent fowl and are able to demonstrate it, then we say, okay, it's spent fowl, there's no non-compliance, there's no mislabeling. If there's discrepancies, we'll pursue further, and if those discrepancies are significant, we'll say the goods are misclassified, reclassify them as broiler chicken, assess the duty and tax, and where there is evidence that this was intentional in some respect, we'll make a referral to our colleagues in criminal investigations within CBSA.
Je comprends que depuis les derniers temps, vous avez intensifié.
I understand that in recent times you have upped the ante to detect the cases of fraud. Given that it takes some time to get results with the current efforts, and if you were to continue with those efforts, could we presume that the results might, become exponential, as in you might actually catch more mislabeled spent fowl over the next short amount of time?
Much faster, especially with CARM, as I alluded to in my opening statement, at identifying imports of spent fowl as soon as they start, and we're addressing it much more quickly.
Thank you very much. Mr. Perron, 6 minutes, please.
Oui. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses for taking the time to be here today. We appreciate it. I have many questions, and so I would like very brief answers. Ms. Allen, I'll start with you. In your opening remarks, you said that there is no labeling issue and that the CFIA has no role to play because it's not a safety issue. If mislabeled spent fowl is imported and it is, sold as broiler chicken once it crosses the border, I do think that there is a labeling issue. If ever there was a recall due to hygiene issues in the United States of that very product, but the label has changed in order to be sold illegally as broiler chicken, then we won't be able to find it.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Indicated earlier, the product is labeled as chicken. So whether it's spent fowl or broiler chicken, it's labeled as chicken. We do not look at the age or the process by which it was slaughtered beforehand, but we do have a veterinarian signed document when the product moves across Canadian borders from the U.S. that attests to the full traceability of the product, where it was slaughtered, how it was slaughtered, as well as the U.S. attests to the animal health and the food safety elements of it.
Je comprends votre réponse, Madame Allen.
I understand this answer. But once the product changes names, once it's crosses the border and it's cut into four and labeled as broiler chicken, how do we trace it? Because it was sold as spent fowl to begin with. There's an intermediary, or there's somebody in there there's something in the process that's not straight, if you will. I understand that it's a complicated issue, but when you do random checks, what would prevent you from taking a sample and analyzing it? How would that be all that much more lengthy? Could there be a collaboration between the CFIA and the CBSA? Ms. Allen, this is not a personal attack, but generally as an MP, we often see that departments are not working together and they don't communicate together. Just for a standard reciprocity, it's 3 different departments. And so if we speak with one, they refer us to another one, and you just keep going around in circles. If the test is funded by the industry, it could be something very relevant that we could add on to all of the efforts that you're already making. And you're doing great work with regards to food safety, but don't you think that there could be some more collaboration?
The labeling requirement, as I indicated earlier, and the attestation provided the product to move across border. Once it arrives into an importing facility, as you are aware, members of the committee, every importer and anybody who is producing product for further manufacturing and is sold within Canada is subject to the Safe Food for Canadian license, and therefore there's traceability requirements and preventive control plans in that space. So their whole chain is actually through from a traceability standpoint. Vis-a-vis your question about collaboration with the CBSA, we are working very, very closely on a variety of facets. This particular file as well.
Je m'excuse, Madame Allen.
And we do work very collaboratively.
Pardon, Madame Allen.
Sorry to cut you off, but your connection isn't great and it's impacting interpretation. We don't have much time left, so thank you for your answers. Mr. Lawton, you said you did you actually come up with did you actually get to collect the $377 million that you referred to?
Unfortunately, I think this question may have been asked previously in terms of collections. While I have the amount assessed here with me, I do not have the amount collected. That's something that we'll table and I have to provide to the committee after.
J'aimerais bien, parce
I would really appreciate that because it seems that that money could actually be invested in the update of that DNA test, given that it's, relevant to the current issue. It would always be silly to cancel the that if we were to would we be able to invest that in the DNA test?
I really wouldn't be able to comment on that, but one thing I should be able to note, if you give me 2 seconds, is just to note that the $360 million is heavily weighted towards the beginning of when we began our compliance verifications. For example, the last year, ending March 31st, 2025, $268,000 was assessed. It wasn't millions. Even this year so far, we've assessed just over $16 million. Again, a significant amount, but not hundreds of millions.
Merci beaucoup. Y a peut-être d'autres choses qu'on peut faire autour.
Maybe there's more that we can do. There's that money that we could invest in the test. Maybe we could look with the CRA, how much was actually paid out for the merchandise? Was it paid for spent foul or not? We assume that the potentially mislabeled spent foul is actually imported at a lesser cost, which is advantageous to the to Canadians. Can we look into that? Would that not be, additional data that we could add to the database?
Could look at. We do have a memorandum of understanding with the Canada Revenue Agency. We do try to use all sources of data that are legally available in order to further our compliance verifications. So potentially, yes.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the Conservatives now, to Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to our witnesses. I just to Ms. Allen, I just want to make sure that we're very clear. And I know you've been asked this question a couple of times, but you were talking about the traceability. So if there was a recall on broiler chicken in the United States, and you saying that's not going to be an issue in terms of traceability and food safety, are you saying that then all chicken imported into Canada from the United States would then be recalled by Canada and the CFIA? Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that your response to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I indicated was we have traceability for the product from the U.S. crossing Canadian borders, and there's traceability when under the importer under the Safe Food for Canadian licensing. So we have a traceability chain between the U.S. to Canada to the importer and then into the traceability within the Safe Food for Canadian licensee. So if there was a food recall that was to happen in the U.S., the chain would be not broken. It would actually facilitate that trace back.
Okay, you're saying the chain won't be broken, but I guess our confusion is a product has come into Canada that's clearly mislabeled. So I'm just not sure how the chain is going in the direction you're expecting it to go when it has been clearly mislabeled and put into the processing or the food chain in another unanticipated direction. So I guess there is some concern, clearly from several of the MPs here, when you say this isn't a food safety issue, when we are clearly importing food into Canada that is mislabeled, and certainly traceability and food safety, I think, should be paramount. But I'll maybe go to Mr. Lawton and Ms. Toxopeus. The $360 million, I know, has been questioned on how much that actually is, but we clearly have a DNA test that showed a great deal of potential about 10 years ago, and that research wasn't followed through upon or wasn't carried through to the end. And the response from our folks at Trent University was a lack of resources. Can you say why that, when you clearly have a potential solution to a significant problem, and it was dropped, why was that not carried upon to see that DNA test come to fruition and used by CBSA?
So I think I can say, I'll put aside the science and the scientific validity. I'm an accountant by training. I'm not a scientist by any means. But in addition to any operational logistical issues, I think as I alluded to before, from a tariff classification, duty and tax perspective, which really is what the CBSA is responsible for in this space. The DNA test, to the extent it does not confirm the age of a chicken, because how old a chicken is really is how spent fowl is defined. It's useful as a risking tool, as an indicator of risk that maybe some of that spent fowl that's being tested is misclassified or mislabeled, but it wouldn't be determinative. We'd still it'd just be one supplement to identify who we should be auditing essentially.
So Mr. Lumby, who was in the panel before you, said there was potential with this test, and in fact, when importers in Canada, those in the United States who are illegally bringing or mislabeling the chicken, when they heard that Canada was looking at this DNA test, he said this had a significant deterrent without us even doing it. Wasn't there potential there to at least see this through until the end and see what would happen as a result? Because clearly you're saying that everything is improving, but we have a 25% increase in the amount of spent fowl, mislabeled chicken coming into Canada. 115% of the entire slaughter of the United States is being imported into Canada. You know, excuse me, but to me, this doesn't sound like success to me. And if there are some options or some tools to add to your toolbox, I don't see why we aren't following that path.
So this is where I think I'll have to start by noting that imports of spent fowl have increased, but in fact, all evidence points to imports of mislabeled spent fowl of non-compliance actually going down significantly. It's still significant at 15%, but it's much less than the 38 or 40% which was seen a decade ago. With respect to the DNA test and its usefulness as a risking tool, it does have potential. At the same time, essentially every importer of commercially significant volumes of spent fowl has either been audited or is currently under audit, and that's something that the CBSA is continuing to do. So an additional risking tool would not necessarily add much to the way in which we identify who gets audited.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, so
Thank you. Okay, we'll next go to MP Connors for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Is there a penalty for repeat offenders? If someone is like you get their first time, is there a penalty for repeat offenders?
So the biggest penalty in this with respect to spent fowl or mislabeled spent fowl is a 249% duty. But in addition to that, there is a administrative monetary penalty that's associated with it, and it does increase depending on the frequency of noncompliance. But to be frank, the most significant penalty, if you would call it that, is when we do have repeat offenders, repeated instances of noncompliance. At that point, it becomes relatively clear that there may be some intent there, and it is a form of fraud. So we will make a referral to our criminal investigations area within CBSA to pursue that. It's no longer just a regulatory administrative matter.
So just going back to, like you have consulted with the industry on different ways of detecting the DNA test and that. Is there any other way that it can be detected? How are you detecting it now?
The principal way in which we determine if goods are truly spent fowl or if they're mislabeled broiler chicken, misclassified broiler chicken, is through the audit of documentation of records, not just the importer's records, but also their suppliers' records and their customers' records, to validate that there's consistency across the supply chain. Everyone, everywhere is labeling the goods as spent fowl, and all evidence points to it being spent fowl. That's really what we've relied upon, and DNA testing or not, provided that the DNA testing wouldn't be able to shed light on the age of a chicken, that would continue to be our primary means of validating compliance.
Okay. So you came up with a number of 15%, I think, is what you just said, 15% or 19%?
Yeah, it was our initial. So the CBSA has done 3 rounds of a national verification priority, basically meaning at a given point in time, we verify all significant importers of spent fowl. The first round was in 2017. The second was in 2020. Those 2 rounds found a 38% noncompliance rate. The third round, the one we're currently finishing up, was launched in 2023, At this point, we have a 15% noncompliance rate.
Do you think that compliance rate is coming down because of the increased tariff that would be put on it and compliance, or better, you're using better ways of detecting spent foul?
I believe it would be a combination of both. Both better risking and better risking, better compliance techniques, but also faster risking, faster interventions, faster audits. Importers are no longer able to import for a year or 2 years before we knock on their door and ask to see their records. Today, generally, it's within a matter of weeks or months. We're able to launch a verification or an audit, which really does address the problem early. If they're inadvertently making an error, we alert them to it. And if they're intentionally or advertently making an error, they become aware that we're on to them very quickly.
Okay. How much?
We have 1.5 minutes left.
Oh, no, right now. So we had the Chicken Farmers of Canada, who are very supportive of the DNA testing and want us to move forward with it. What do you have? We talk about what you have in your toolbox. Tell us what you have in your toolbox that can satisfy to be able to pick out the spent chicken or the broiler chicken.
I'd say in general there's 3 different tools in our toolbox. There are 3 different things that really will address this issue. The first is we're verifying or auditing every single significant importer. We either have audited them or we are in the process of auditing them. So everyone who's in this space is getting contacted by the CBSA. The second is that we continue to monitor imports, and using the CBSA's new CARM system, we're actually much better at monitoring in a faster way. We look to see if there's any changes in importer behavior, any changes in market behavior. We're able to identify that very quickly and address it as appropriate. And the third is essentially, just as you said, the 249% duty rate is prohibitive. If we're able to identify non-compliant imports very quickly and assess that duty very quickly, 249% duty generally will dissuade people from attempting to mislabel.
Thank you very much. Mr. Perron, 2.5 minutes, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lawton, I've been listening to your answers, and you've said a few times that the DNA test does not give the age of the chicken or of the hen, but we've been told the opposite. People from the university, from Trent University, also seem to say that it does give the age of the hen. If the test was not yet perfect, wouldn't it be worth investing in order to develop that tool?
My understanding, and again, I'm happy to be corrected by anyone from Trent University, but my understanding is the DNA test is able to determine if the chicken is male or female and the breed of the chicken, so whether it's commonly used for eggs or not, but the age is not a factor.
Monsieur Lawton, moi je suis pas scientifique moi non plus, fait qu'on est.
I'm not a scientist either, so you and I are in the same boat. My understanding is that that information would be provided, and it would be important for you to verify that. When you say 49% of 249% of tariffs when boiler to dissuade such fraud, I don't know that that's enough because there are people who are repeat offenders. Why can't we eliminate an import permit, for example? Maybe that would actually prevent mislabeled spent fowl from being imported.
Unfortunately, I'd have to defer to colleagues within Global Affairs Canada with respect to import permits or the management of the tariff rate quota system. I apologize.
C'est une suggestion que je fais à Affaires mondiales Canada.
So I will be making that recommendation to GAC, because we do have to, tackle this problem that's been persisting for 10 or 12 years, or even longer. A test has been developed. I've been questioned on the test and how long it'll take, but at least we'll have a test. And I think that it would send a very strong message if we have that test in place. In the previous panel, knowledge of this test actually helped reduce the amount of mislabeled spent fowl being imported. So thank you for your recommendations today, and I am happy that you are open to looking into the CRA's numbers because there's some suspicious activity here. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to our final 5 minutes from the Conservatives, and go ahead, Mr. Bonk.
This question would be to Ms. Allen and the CFIA. So what organization is in charge of labeling and enforcement in Canada? So once the spent fowl is in Canada, who enforces labeling?
So the misrepresentation of fowl in terms of its import is a CBSA responsibility. Labeling on the packaging for sold to consumers is a CFI responsibility. And on that labeling, it clearly says chicken. We do not differentiate spent fowl labeling versus broiler chicken labeling. It is just chicken. That is the responsibility we have at CFI.
So what would be the difference if someone was to import buffalo and call it beef, for example? Is there no enforcement once it's in Canada?
Thank you for the question. So if the product that is coming in is misrepresented, that is definitely a responsibility for CFIA. And misrepresentation in this circumstance, as you've indicated, Mr. Chair, would be a different species versus the species that's on the label. So in the question of spent fowl is chicken and broiler chicken is chicken.
Okay, but there's a DNA test that's been proposed here that can basically solve the problem between broiler meat and spent fowl, and it's being proposed to you by the chicken farmers of Canada. Is that not something you could use as a tool to have proper labeling? Because it seems the crux of the problem here is a labeling issue.
The question is not a labeling of the product per se, it's a question of the misrepresentation when it's imported through the tariffs aspect. So maybe I can defer to my colleague at CBSA.
I'll carry on. I'd like to make some comments into the record. In response to Chicken Farmers of Canada request, Federal Minister of Agriculture announced, and I quote, "To ensure appropriate tariff classification of spent fowl, the government will also look at specific options regarding certification requirements for imports of spent fowl product, while ensuring that any such requirement would be fully consistent with Canada's international trade obligations," end quote. That quote came from the Minister of Agriculture. He was Lawrence MacAulay, and that quote was made in November of 2016. This committee is undergoing two studies, and I can't help but draw some parallels between them. You can't help but wonder why Canadians are frustrated at times with government and our departments when we're talking about the speed of reacting to issues. That was back in 2016. I want to laud the work of the Chicken Farmers of Canada for their persistence in carrying on. They've provided us some of the materials, and I'm just going to read into the record a bit of the chronology of this entire issue. 2013, multiple meetings with AAFC and CBSA to find ways to prevent illegal imports and to request specific labeling for spent fowl products. Brackets, CFIA requires whole bird to be labeled as, quotes, mature chicken, but cut up products to be labeled as chicken. Therefore, it misleads consumers. 2014, successful DNA test developed by Trent University presented to government officials. 2014, still proposed pilot for DNA testing from Trent University, Sterisense to government officials. 2016, the Senate Standing Committee on Agriculture and Forestry had hearings on the import of spent fowl. 2016, presentation of spent fowl DNA to test the DNA test to government officials for scientific validation. 2016, CFIA suspended a cold storage facility in Detroit for mislabeling practices. 2017, Chicken Farmers of Canada seeking progress from government officials on the validation of the DNA test. 2017, first round of CBSA priority verifications for spent fowl. 2018, blind validation of DNA tests, 90 samples, and we've heard testimony on that. 2019, ongoing lobby to have the implementation of the DNA test, and we heard in testimony radio silence since then, till a couple of weeks ago. 2020, second round of CBSA priority validations for spent fowl. 2023, third round of CBSA priority validations for spent fowl, $250 million assessed for misclassified imports under rounds 1 and 2. 2023, imports are increasing again. Year-to-date, end of July, 17% increase. Estimated annual volume to be at 85 million kilograms, similar to 2020. And in 2023, we're starting to have imports from Brazil and Argentina.
Reporters are saying you're just going a little bit too fast.
I
Sorry.
will slow down.
Yeah.
I do have that tendency. It's not a wonder that the public, that farm organizations become frustrated with the speed of government and of departments to respond. Mr. Chair, the numbers don't add up. One country cannot import more than 100% of another country's production without there being fraud, criminal fraud. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll go to the Liberals for the final 5 minutes. MP Harrison.
Thank you very much. My first question is CBSA. How frequently or how many cases has the Criminal Investigation Unit of the CBSA been successful in investigating when it comes to spent fowl?
Unfortunately, I don't have those numbers in front of me. To the extent, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure even to what extent those could be shared. That's something I think if it's acceptable, we table and provide at a later date to the extent we're able to.
Do you know what the consequence is if the criminal investigation is successful, what the consequence is?
It would be a criminal infraction in terms of the actual consequences, in terms of penalties. I really am not able to say. Again, I apologize.
That's okay. So if the DNA test is not what the CBSA needs to prevent this from happening, what would be an alternative solution? Because clearly it's still a problem that needs a solution. So what would be the recommendation?
That's a good question. Again, DNA testing, it's not that it's not a solution, it's just that it's a solution to help us, to assist us in risking. In terms of other alternatives, to be honest, I don't really have other alternatives in front of me right now that leap to mind.
So when it comes to the difference between a broiler and a layer, if the DNA test is able to differentiate between the two, wouldn't that at least be a flag if there was a surge of, let's say, layer being put through? Would that not at least be a flag so that the CBSA could further investigate?
So my understanding, and again, I'm speaking as a layman, is that the test is essentially able to differentiate between breeds that are usually used for eggs and which are spent fowl, and breeds that are normally used for broiler chicken. To the extent that those breeds are the traditional breeds are always used in those two purposes, it's able to be used. In recent years, with both trade diversification, but as well as changing market conditions, where egg shortages mean that some birds, which traditionally were used for broiler, are now used for eggs, the mix of what is spent fowl, what breeds are commonly used, may be changing. So really, it is an indicator of potential noncompliance, but the extent to which it is a reliable indicator is something we'd really need to look into further if we were to operationalize the DNA.
Okay. I guess my question, because there is not many large producers would ever use a laying hen to produce meat for broilers, because it would be like I farm, so it would be like it would be nonsensical to use a layer hen to produce, because a broiler is designed to produce heavy breast meat and is best for market. So I think the thing is, if the DNA test is at minimum could at least flag a large amount of layers, would that not at least make a step again forward for like the chicken farmers of Canada to make sure their market access is protected?
So what that would do would be essentially to identify shipments where it's almost certain that the goods being declared as spent fowl are truly spent fowl because the breed is used for spent fowl. It's a layer chicken. It wouldn't necessarily help us identify non-compliance. What it would do would be to reduce the amount of noise in the system by validating true compliance to a certain extent. So low-risk shipments, it would help us identify those, yes.
Certainly. Based on historical data, how much spent fowl meat should be imported from the United States annually?
Unfortunately, that I don't have that in terms of historical trends. I don't have that in front of me.
That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. This is the end of our meeting. I'd like to adjourn. Is there any opposition to adjourning? Okay. Meeting adjourned.